The Kent Lapp Podcast.
The church that I grew up in had been like a kind of IFB leaning church that then became Calvinistic. So the culture I grew up in was pretty good theology, but some of the cultural aspects that came from IFB were still there. So like guys and girls shouldn't really talk to each other. A lot of the purity movement kind of stuff was there. Very strong gender roles. They didn't really know a lot about abuse or anything like that. So there was a lot of interesting stuff that, happened as I grew up.
And what is IFB? What is that?
Independent Fundamentalist Baptist.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, I grew up in that until I was about 15, and then I got involved, and our family got involved in a parachurch Christian homeschooling organization called Vision Forum. And we never were officially part of the movement. Like, we didn't go to the conferences, but we definitely agreed with the theology. I listened to all of the, CDs and all that kind of stuff. And definitely took all of it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
So at that point, I got involved in what was called the stay-at-home daughter movement, which was basically the idea, partly from Numbers 30, that daughters should be under the protection and authority of their father until they would have a husband. So until they got married. And so
no matter the age?
Yes, no matter the age.
What about like 50?
Yeah, you can still.
You're probably caretakers for your parents at that point.
Yeah. And there were definitely, it's a difficult movement to describe because there were definitely a lot of degrees to which people took these ideas. So you had some people who were pretty well-meaning and they agreed with the ideas, but they tended to do it in an okay way. And other people who really took it to extremes.
Like daughters wouldn't have their bedroom door, for example, or things like that.
Or be allowed to drive or leave the house without their dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is a movement that's within evangelical Christianity.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have to come back to that. It's like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where does that even, how is that possible? We're all reading the same book, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to come back to that.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy to me.
It is. So I grew up believing that I shouldn't go to college, shouldn't work outside the home, and I should just, wait to get married. So, of course, my life revolved around trying to get married. And
yeah, that sounds a lot more fun than being under your dad's authority. Like, as a 30-year-old, I'll be honest. Like, I'd be looking to get married too. Like, any takers?
Well, you definitely. What's crazy is seeing the divorce rates
yeah.
of women who married to escape, and then they're like, "This isn't any better," and the disillusionment, and then many walking away from the faith.
Ooh.
Yeah, many walking away from the faith.
Well, not only that, but if you grow up in that system, that's how you view your dad, and that authority is okay to you, and it sounds about right, well, then that's going to carry over into your marriage relationship too.
Exactly.
And now your marriage relationship isn't going to be functioning properly. You're not going to have the right worldview, the mind structure around how this is actually supposed to work.
Exactly.
So that's not going to work very good, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the beliefs that especially the more extreme people took on was that really your dad is your mediator. So a lot of these women growing up in this felt like if I walk away from my dad, I'm literally walking away from the faith. He's my mediator between me and Christ.
Whoa.
And the husband would then take on that role. So you can imagine the implications of that. Yeah.
What's scary about a system like that is you have, that dad or that husband is ultimate, right? If he's the mediator,
yeah,
that's what he says goes. That's it. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you were in that movement?
Yeah, I was in that movement until...
Where were you at on the spectrum in that movement? Like,
I would say theologically, I was fairly extreme, but my dad actually wasn't really on board with it.
Okay.
So I was kind of doing it and trying to make it work with a dad that wasn't really on board.
Really?
Yeah.
So this came from you and your siblings, or just you?
Yeah, me and my siblings and my mom.
Okay. So did it come from your mom?
Yeah, that's how I got introduced to it anyways.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So that sort of makes sense. I'm just thinking it would sound rare for like you to be like surfing the internet or whatever and be like, oh, this movement looks interesting, and look into it and
Yeah.
subscribe to it. Usually it would come like through the parents, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And I would actually think it would mostly come from the dad. But in your situation, it didn't so much.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about this movement is
Yeah.
that a lot of it was actually driven by the women.
Yeah.
So there was like a handful of really strong, like authoritarian patriarchal men that really liked the
I
idea.
don't even know if I would use the word strong because mostly it comes out of weakness. But
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
But there were definitely those extreme guys who took it on. But then for the most part, I would say maybe 80% of the movement was
driven by women. Yeah.
women who are disillusioned with their passive husbands and wanted them to step up and lead, and that was their way of.
So it's kind of patriarchy, or is matriarchy just hiding itself in patriarchy?
Yeah, and we were openly patriarchal. We took on that label.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how does that work when the dad's not really into it though? Like he just kind of goes along
You
with
keep
it.
it a secret.
Oh, okay.
Because if anybody finds out, then you're not as good of wife material.
What do you mean? If anyone finds out, like from outside the circles?
From outside of your family. Because basically a guy's gonna, if he's looking for, the perfect wife in this group, then he's gonna want someone who's already submitting to her father, already playing that role that he wants to take on. So if she's not, even if she would want to be, it's not an ideal situation. And really one of the things about this movement was that it was so incredibly idealistic. Like they didn't talk about what do you do if your dad's not on board? What do you do if your dad is abusive? So you had a lot of unideal situations, but
No
that was
answers.
not
What do you do
addressed.
with the 90 things out of 100 that could go wrong because you're focused on the 10 things out of 100 that you like? That's sort of how it seems to me. Like there's all kinds of ways that could go wrong.
Yes.
And I'm sure it does a lot.
Just shame people who aren't able to keep up the appearances.
Yeah.
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 But how have I never heard of this stay-at-home daughter movement? You said it's been around obviously it's been around for some years.
Yeah. It's been around for about 15, 20 years.
At least 15
At least
years.
15 years.
What not to reflect poorly, I guess, but I'm just kind of curious, like what circles does it tends to run in more theologically or denominationally, or I don't know.
There are some micro presbyteries that definitely hold very strongly to this. There might be a Presbyterian denomination of, say, 10, 20 churches. That there's several of those that hold very tightly to this, or at least have in the past. Some of the Federal they don't call themselves Federal Vision anymore. You can get there with some of the Federal Vision crowd. At least I've seen that with people I've talked to on the internet. I don't know how reflective that is of overall people. I think it's definitely growing in some circles, some Presbyterian circles right now. But at the time, it was more of a Reformed Baptist thing.
Yeah.
So it was more common in Reformed Baptist churches.
Was homeschooling a common thing?
That was huge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like most of the people doing this
In fact,
were
a
also
lot of the
homeschooling?
conferences, even though my family was more influenced by, oh goodness,
Bill Gothard.
Thank you. I have a mental block. This happens all the time. Bill, I can't say the name, but Bill Gothard was really the influence that my dad had. My dad had met Doug Phillips, who is the leader of Vision Forum. He had talked to him. My parents had attended conferences that had their speakers. So they really came in the door through homeschooling, and it's just how far down the rabbit hole did you go really determined how many of these other ideas did you pick up.
Yeah, so the movement started with a magazine that sold kids' toys and books and that kind of stuff. And then slowly it grew into them selling a lot of teachings, like CDs and DVDs and that kind of stuff. And then grew into them doing conferences and film festivals and a lot of overseas trips. Well, not overseas, but like history trips to England and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
They being like the leaders of Vision Forum.
Vision Forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Vision Forum one of their sub brands, if you will, was stay-at-home daughter movement.
Yes.
That'd be like one of their pillars.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it
Gotcha.
started with
Interesting.
the homeschooling, and that's where a lot of
Okay.
people got attached to Vision Forum from.
Okay.
And then I would say they went into gender roles within marriage, so really strong on wives submitting and husbands leading
In the stay-home
in
daughter.
the patriarchal way
Mm-hmm.
flavor.
Yeah, and I would say the stay-at-home daughter portion really kind of piggybacked on those gender roles.
Mhm.
It just took them to a logical extreme. Since
Sure.
all men and all women, well, daughters are female, and just go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they started getting into some other ideas like, okay, well, maybe even dads shouldn't work outside the home. Everybody should have their own family business. And then you've got, also like, you should probably be self-sufficient and have your own farm. So you kind of had families moving more and more toward isolation where they're all working together. They don't have contact with the outside world very much.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help with getting married.
Yeah. Well, it depends who you want to get married to, though. If you want to get married to other people like that, it's exactly what you need to be doing. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
it's one of the. I think it depends. Like someone. So I grew up in the Mennonite culture,
Okay.
and my wife grew up Amish until she was 15 or 16, and then she left. And Mennonites and Amish were similar in we're all under the Anabaptist umbrella. If you've heard of Anabaptists, and but the Amish, of course, you're probably more familiar with them. Horse and buggies, no electricity, and all that. But Mennonites, I wasn't supposed to wear shorts, but I got to pretty much look like this. I could wear a T-shirt. We had cars and everything. We just no TV, no radio, and some rules. But like the ladies, that was different. Like it was dresses and bonnets and those types of things, head coverings and stuff. And like you would look different, if you're walking through an airport. And someone asked me one time, like, man, where do those people get the kind of the courage or the resolve or whatever to like be okay looking different in public, whether it's a mall or an airport or whatever it is, a public place? Well, I think, that is an interesting question because you do sort of get accustomed to it. But one of the things that stood out to me is, and, people are welcome to kind of argue against my point here, but I think one of the reasons that they do that is because it's harder to leave because your culture and your system and your friends and your church and your community, it's so close around you and everyone's doing this. Sure, you look different when you walk through an airport, but how often do you do that? Once a week, once a month, once a year? Not that often. Right. The rest of the time, you're being the good boy or girl like you should be. And so you can look different at the mall because that's much less painful than changing your everyday. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's actually not like, oh, they're strong. In my argument, you could say, well, it's not like, oh, they're strong, they're okay looking different in public. It's no, they're maybe not strong enough. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to just tack one thing on there, which is that I still have lots of friends that are in that kind of that culture, and they are saved and they are godly, and God bless them. Like, go for it, 100%. If you're into that, go for it. That's not how I wanted to live the rest of my life, so we made a change. So anyhow.
Yeah. And I would definitely agree with that. And from my own personal experience, I think part of it also was that we were taught that this was the right way and that we were almost like a higher degree of Christian, like we're more faithful than all the other people. So
everyone says that. That's how I was taught too. That's what's so crazy.
Yes.
So I felt
it's like, dude, at some point we all have to just stop and just look at this from the outside. This is insane.
Yeah. Well,
that's exactly what I thought.
So one of the things we talk about a lot on our podcast is what we call authoritarian fundamentalism. So you have a lot of people bashing fundamentalism at large. And I really struggle with this, and I don't even know exactly where I'll land in, say, 5 or 10 years. But right now, I can't say, with 100% confidence, I cannot say that the entire withdrawing from the world that the fundamentalists did, of all the different varieties of fundamentalists that are out there, because there are many, that it was all wrong. Because there was a lot going on, especially around the turn of the century, when fundamentalism really got moving. So it was 1950 1915, I think the fundamentalist paper started getting written of the fundamentals. So 1915 through 17, if I remember right. And so I don't want to just attack all of fundamentalism, because there are, like you say, many good, faithful Christians who love the Lord that he's using in those circles. And it's good as far as that goes. So I've qualified it a little bit. We use the term authoritarian fundamentalism because when you have this withdrawal from the world and then you couple it with this is the one you follow.
Right.
That's not Jesus.
Yeah.
It's always toxic.
Yes.
I can't find a single exception.
Yes,
at all.
It is. And your comment though about being the enlightened ones, that's people need to understand that is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yes.